Hey, I'm Alex and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to work on the Python Mario problem from CS50. I'm only going to cover the easier version here, so it's going to be a really short video, but I'm also going to add a tutorial for the more comfortable version. So we've already seen how we can implement this in C, and in fact, doing that in C is way more complicated than in Python because Python is much easier, at least on this current level. So I'm not going to get in depth and I'm not going to give detailed explanations of everything because I've already gone through the concept of building the pyramid in my C video. So if you haven't seen it, you can go there. You'll see a link. But let's quickly go over that once more. So we have to build a pyramid. The user is going to enter the height, and we want to get to this maximum height and build a pyramid. So I've already executed all of these commands. So in case you haven't, you can do it, but I've already taken care of that because it's pretty easy. Now let's take a look at the specification. So write in the file called MarioPy, a program that recreates the half pyramid using hashes for blocks, exactly as you did in problem set 1, except that your program this time should be written in Python. To make things more interesting, first prompt the user with getInt for the half pyramid's height, a positive integer between 1 and 8 inclusive. If the user fails to provide a positive integer no greater than 8, you should reprompt for the same again. Then generate, with the help of print and one or more loops, the desired half pyramid. Take care to align the bottom left corner of your half pyramid with the left-hand edge of your terminal window. Alright, so let's quickly go on my tablet and analyze the problem, but again, I'm not going to get in depth. I usually advise students to think of the pyramid as a square where some of the, as a grid actually, where some of the squares are filled in to build a pyramid and the others are left empty or are spaces. So let's say we want to build a pyramid with a height of 4 inside of this grid. So what it will look like is this. I've actually selected the ruler. I don't want it. So you can already see that on the website. That's why I'm not explaining it. But this is what the pyramid will look like, right? If we want a height of 4. So let's quickly analyze what's happening here. So here on the first row, we have row 1. So when the row is 1, we have 1 filled in squared and 3 empty ones. On row number 2, so let's go here, row 2. We have 2 filled in squares and 2 empty ones. On row number 3, we have 3 filled in squares and 1 empty. And on row number 4, we have 4 filled in squares. So I can already notice that the number of hashes we need, or the number of filled in squares, is actually equal to the row we're on. And then how can we obtain the number of spaces or the number of empty squares we need? So the size of the pyramid is 4, or the height, it doesn't really matter. So if we want to calculate the number of spaces, we're going to have the size minus, okay, let me write it here actually, sorry. Size minus the current row. So on row 1, we obviously have 1 hash, and then if we want to calculate the spaces, it's going to be 4, which is the size, minus the current row, which is 1. So 4 minus 1, we have 3 spaces. Then on the second row, we have the size, which is again 4, and then we subtract the current row, which is 2, and we get 2 spaces. In a similar way, we have 4 minus 3 on the third row, which gives us 1 space, and on the fourth row, we have 0 spaces. So that was the basic explanation, and once we found this relation, it's extremely easy to write it in Python. So let's now go on to the CS50 IDE. So I'm in my folder, I've opened the file. So let's first take the getInt method from the CS50 library. So from CS50, import getInt, right? And first, let's take the height or the size. Now, I'm going to call it size here, but it doesn't really matter what you choose. So size equals get int, and now we can write some kind of a prompt to the user. So I'm going to say enter the height, like that. And then if you come here and say print height, size, that's what I called the variable, we should be able to see it. So let's test it quickly. I'm already inside of my folder, and I want to say Python and then Mario Pi. Yeah, I misspelled it. So Python Mario Pi. There we go. So we enter the height, and we should see 4 again. So yeah, we printed 4, which like currently doesn't make much sense, but it works. So we've successfully obtained the size of the pyramid. Now, there's something else. We had this condition to only accept numbers, let me see where it was, which are positive and which are between 1 and 8 inclusive. So let's use a while loop to say while the size is less than 1. So now we're listing the options which would be invalid. So while it is less than 1 or it is greater than 8, because it cannot be less than 1 or greater than and greater than 8 at the same time, of course. But if it's one of these, then it's invalid. And when it's invalid, I'm going to prompt for it again. So I'm going to basically copy this line of code. So the first time I'm taking the size, and then I'm saying if it's less than 1, which means it's invalid, or if it's greater than 8, which is also invalid, ask for it again until the user enters a valid number. So let's come here and print size again, but this time we're going to try entering some invalid numbers to see if we are handling them correctly. So I'm going to say 10, which is too big. All right. I'm going to try with -1, 0. Okay. Let's try 8. 8 should work. Okay, perfect. So it works. And now we can continue and actually start printing the pyramid. So we're going to have for loop, of course, for I, or let's say row, I think it's going to be more descriptive, for each row inside of our pyramid. So we're going to start at row 1 and go. Now, you may say go to row 4, right? But keep in mind that the pyramids have different heights. So like the example I gave you on my tablet was with a pyramid of height of 4, but it could be more, it could be less. So we need to insert it dynamically. So we want to say size. So take the size. And now, let's actually leave it this way for now, even though it's not going to work perfectly. But let's come here and say print row and see how it looks. So I'm going to run it again, and I want to pyramid with the height of 4. All right. So now we see 1, 2, 3, but we don't see 4. Why is that? Well, something which is very important to remember about Python is that these for loops are exclusive, which means that, or at least like the end index is exclusive, which means that if I enter a size of 5, it's going to go up to 5 but not included. If I, like in this case, I entered a height of 4, but it went to 4 but exclusive, so it didn't include 4. So if I want to change this and make it work, I can just add 1. So if the size is, let's say the 5 is 3, I want to go to 4 but not including it. That's why I'm adding 1. So the 4 is going to be excluded, but we're going to get 1 to 3 if that's what we've entered. So now let's save it and run it again with the same height. So I'm going to use 4 now, and we can see that we've successfully printed 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, perfect. So now, how can we print the pyramid? First, we notice this relation where the number of hashes we want to print is always equal to the current row. So if we are on row 1, we want to print 1 hash, right? So I'm going to say hashes, even though like if you are more advanced, you won't even need to write this, but I'm going to declare a separate variable to make it more readable. So hashes, so the number of hashes is always going to equal the row. They're equal. And now how can we calculate the number of spaces we need before the hashes? Well, it's equal to the total size, for instance 4, minus the number of hashes, for instance 1. So if we have a size of 4, we have on the first row, 1 hash, 3 spaces. On the second row, we have 2 hashes, 2 spaces, etc. So I'm going to say spaces equals the total size minus the number of hashes, like that. And once we've successfully obtained the count of all of the symbols we need, we can just say, now here's something really interesting about Python, which we weren't able to do in C. So I'm going to say print. And now first I want to print a couple of spaces, right? And I'm going to use the multiplication symbol or the asterisk and say spaces. Now, what does it mean? Python is extremely clever, and when he sees multiplication with a string, not a number, it's not going to try to do any arithmetic calculations, but instead it's going to print the sign on the left as many times as like the value of the variable on the right. So if we need 4 spaces, we're going to take this empty, like this space, and print it 4 times. So this is a really cool thing you can use in Python. In JavaScript, you also have like repeat, but this is extremely easy, so I think that's going to be the option we'll go for. So we want to print the spaces, and I think that's it for the spaces. And afterwards, after the spaces, so we've already printed these 3 spaces, and now we want to print the hashes, so it's going to be pretty much the same. So I'm going to say print a hash, and then how many times we want to print it. Well, we already have the number of hashes, so we can say take a hash and print it the number I have calculated. So now if we come here and try to run the program, we're going to say I want to hide 4, and we see that something is not completely fine. Now why is that? Because by default, when we have a print statement, it adds a new line. Since we want to have the spaces and the hash on the same line, we want to add this end equals an empty string. Sorry, I accidentally deleted the ending bracket. But what's going to happen here is that we're going to print, for instance, 3 spaces, and then I'm going to say do not add a new line, but leave it as an empty string. That's going to be the end, and then print the next thing immediately. So let's try running it again. So we want to hide 4. All right, this works perfectly. So we have 1, 2, 3 spaces and 1 hash. Then 2 spaces, 2 hashes, 1 space, 3 hashes, and then 4 hashes in the end. Let's try with a height of 1, and then we're directly going to run check50. All right, perfect. We only see 1 hash because that's what a pyramid of height of 1 would look like. And let's now copy the command for check50. And see if all of the tests are going to pass. Alright, so now I can see that all of the tests are green, but you can see some smiley faces, which means that our code works as expected. So that was everything for this video. By the way, we can actually run style 50, even though that's something you could fix very easily, but let's see. Alright, it looks good, so everything's perfect. And that was everything for this tutorial. It was a shorter one. If you have any suggestions about future tutorials I should make, feel free to add them in the comment section or drop them in my Discord server. That's where I'm most active and I help CS50 students. So I hope this video was helpful, and I'm going to see you in the next tutorial.